do as the moderator now is introduce the moderator for the panel, which is Victor Wheatman, independent from California. I feel like you're part of the panel, Victor. And Victor will introduce the panel and the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Let me spill this first. Let me introduce our panel. First, we have Dr. Josef Allen, PhD. Well, that's redundant, Dr. PhD. Scientist, InfoSec professional, invited expert, trusted computing group. He's of the U.S. Air Force, an expert in SCADA systems and similar industrial controls, as well as the appropriate and related security issues. Over there is Stacy Cannady. He is a trustworthy, computing expert for Cisco Systems, a little company in Silicon Valley. Maybe you've heard of it. Previously, he was with IBM, Lenovo, and DMI. He's been involved since the early days of TPM, TCG, and implementations. He's on a number of working groups, including the Embedded Systems group at TCG. He's written and spoken extensively on this topic over the last number of years. My name is Vic Wheatman, free agent. I left Gardner a little over a year ago. After 20 years, enough was enough. I was managing vice president for the security group, covered a variety of topics, including PKI. PKI was very good to me. Remember the year of PKI? Covering now convergence, security on the Internet of Things, security budgets. Of course, the team at Gardner covered quite a number of topic areas. And I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative to begin. We've often heard that security is not a destination, it is a journey. And every time someone says to me, security is a journey, I hear the kids in the back seat going, when are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? And one of the stops along my journey in understanding and working within the security consulting and advisory service was one of the early stage Internet and the Security of Things, or just the Internet of Things conference. A very small conference occurred somewhere in Silicon Valley where I live and work. And people there were demonstrating light bulbs with IP addresses. And I scratched my head and someone said, energy management. Okay. And then I had kind of a visceral experience being a child of the 60s. I had kind of a flashback. And I remember this, let's see if I can push the right button. I remember this from 1996. Dr. Vittencerf, one of the fathers of the Internet, wearing the t-shirt, IP on everything. And this has a dual meaning, of course, for us senior citizens. But back then, he was talking about putting IP addresses on light bulbs, on just about everything. And the light bulb example came up recently in an article in August. Hacking the light bulb, malware can produce a sustained blackout. Security researchers uncovered a vulnerability within a specific smart lighting system that can lead to a sustained blackout using a laptop. Lighting is critical to physical security. Weak authentication, password systems in the system were seen as vulnerable. So light bulbs with IP addresses opens up a new door. And every time we change the platform, every time there's a new technology change, every time there's a new business paradigm, we find that this creates opportunities and vulnerabilities. So in the vulnerabilities are, in fact, opportunities. The goal, of course, in making things secure is to get to whatever commercially reasonable security is. And what is the definition of that? A lot of us have that an intuitive feeling, but certainly it's a number of things. How mature is the technology? How mature are the processes? What is the state of the art? How much does it cost versus the risk factors that we're looking at? What could happen? What are the scenarios that would cause us grief? What are the anticipated threats? We'll hear more about some of the threats that exist in this context of the Internet of Things. What would happen if something did fail? What are the standards? And the beautiful thing about standards is that there are so many to choose from. You've got COSO and COBIT, and in this context there are a number of technical as well as business standards out there. What is everyone else doing? And oftentimes for the early adopters, we've had to say to people, we say, well, what's everyone else doing? Who are the market leaders? What are the best practices? Well, we had to say, well, look in the mirror. You're creating them now. And finally, what does the regulator say? What does the auditor say? What does the risk boards have to say about what is reasonable security? So reasonable security is kind of like pornography. We kind of know it when we see it. Black Hat, physical device security. Are they helping or hurting? And maybe we can get to some discussion about what security researchers do. Of course, in this context, we like to think that they're helping. At least most of them are helping. But a lot of them are having some fun and games. The Internet of Things starts perhaps with mobile devices, and we extend that. We extend well beyond that. What we've advised our enterprise customers is that you take a common approach for both wired and wireless security. This is an interesting area to explore, where who has responsibility? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the carrier? Is it the corporation? Is it the person who's carrying their BYOD device with them? This led to mobile data management and a bunch of other interesting things. But if you don't get good cell service, you may want to have a femtocell, I think I'm pronouncing that right, a femtocell installed. And the early implementations of this had some issues, which could have led to copying private keys off of SIM cards and using them to eavesdrop, denial of service attacks and things like that. I kind of likened it to the early days of wireless access points that people put into the ceilings in their offices so they could walk around with their laptops and take them to meetings and look cool and multitask and develop ADHD. Using people out in the parking lot used Pringles cans to sort of sniff off the wireless networks of corporations and gain access to corporate networks. So we're kind of back to that kind of scenario. And what else? Stuxnet, you've heard of, SCADA attacks. Dr. Allen and Stacy will touch on these issues. The Stuxnet entered a network through it wasn't even connected. The devices that were infected were not even connected to a network. They were infected by USB tokens. And then they got out into the wild and created all kinds of fun, including spinning the centrifuges on Iranian nuclear fuel development. There were other real and imagined scenarios with SCADA systems being vulnerable, and this has gone on for quite some time and is now being addressed. The late hacker Barnaby Jack demonstrated a number of attacks on devices, including one where he successfully injected insulin, enough insulin to kill somebody. He injected it into a mannequin, which was, good. No one volunteered for that demonstration. He also earlier demonstrated an ATM machine that he was able to get to spit out money. Now, I had that happen to me once, and the dollars, the $20 bills just kept coming. I put 20 in, and 2 would come out. And I didn't hack that ATM machine, honest officer. But these things have happened, and the demonstrations are out there. And the solutions to these things include specialized operating systems on medical devices, certification of those medical devices, recertification with a security context in mind. Multifunction printers. This came home when I was in the office and found some confidential documents printed out on the local printer I was using. Turns out the senior vice president was hit the print button and forgot to change his default printer. So it showed up in the office, confidential inside information. Other attacks against the hard drive on these multifunction devices, finding them for resale with interesting information stored in their memory. There are a number of solutions and differentiators in the printing world to protect these devices. Getting out into the consumer world, but also extrapolating into things like video conferencing, perhaps. We have seen cable TV operators and manufacturers put security in so that a consumer can't walk away with a set-top box, hook it up to another provider, and life goes on. So it's kind of protecting the intellectual property, protecting the relationship that the consumer has with the cable TV company. Again, every time there's a change, like the change we're seeing now in the delivery of streaming video, such as from Netflix, the role of digital rights management, things like that, tie it all together. So when we talk about the Internet of Things, we have to realize we're talking about billions and billions and billions of endpoints, creating all kinds of potential problems, as well as opportunities for security professionals and solution providers. Security in machine-to-machine discussion. Interchange. We're not talking about Iron Man here. We're talking about M2M cellular modules and other methodologies that might be used, that are used for a number of different interesting applications around the world, including, yes, security, remote monitoring of devices, such as vending machines and point of sales activity, track and trace on various mobile assets and automotive. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The Advanced Meter Initiative, the Internet of Things, billions and billions of homes having smart meters installed for power management, power conservation, the concerns, of course, theft of service, identifying empty houses, no power is being used, let's go rob them. It would be kind of neat to get a list of low power users who aren't hooked up to solar, and then do some creative asset transition in the middle of the night. IP on everything. Certificates are installed on these smart meters in order to make sure that the meters aren't being properly updated, properly read, and have not been fooled around with. There was one flaw in one implementation here where they would sign a document and then compress it. And what they found, the flaw was that when a package was uncompressed, it may launch malware as part of that process that was inserted into that envelope, into that device. Digital certificates are helpful. They're not the only solution. They're part of the solution. There is a problem when we talk about PKI and digital certificates that everything could be solved with a digital certificate, the hammer and nails phenomena. And it goes back to, I think, 1999 was the year of PKI, or maybe it was the year 2000, maybe it was 2001, 2002, I'm not sure. The year came and went. We look at the modern automobile, lots and lots of input devices within the modern automobile. You got your satellite, you got your radio, you got the CD player, you could hook up for audio through your iPod. We have various types of telematics, Bluetooth. Bluetooth turned out to be a channel for some hacking that occurred. We'll show you what happened. I'll show you now. Car Shark, not to be confused with Shop Talk. Car Shark. This was a demonstration by a number of academics that broke into an automobile system, and the potential there was to compromise the privacy of the individuals, but there are other potential problems that can occur when you hack into an automobile speeding down a highway, as you can imagine. We also found this case study from Texas where somebody was angry with their employer and gained access to the vehicle disabling technology that was in this vehicle. If someone owed money, the dealership was able to turn off the car, basically, and a person couldn't start it. In this case, someone hacked in, stopped cars from starting, started cars honking in the middle of the night, and did a transfer of the title to various celebrities who didn't really own those vehicles. Annoying, yes, potentially life-threatening. There are a number of providers. This is just a partial sample listing of some of the providers that are now addressing various aspects of security and the Internet of Things. I think Stacy has some additional context here. Industrial Defender in the SCADA area, formerly known as Verano. Various CAs, certificate authorities for device certificates. They have specific pricing for device certificates, or you can make your own. Companies that work for software protection, companies that work in the so-called convergence area of physical and cybersecurity, working together and usually in identity and access management and building access. Various boutiques doing testing, our sponsors or organizers of this conference, Wave, with embedded security devices and other approaches, and Mokana, which provides the technology behind Samsung's safe implementation on mobile phones and provides toolkits for various implementations of security. So the list of market opportunity, potential problems in the realm of security and the Internet of Things is a rather long list. This is a problematic area that we're becoming more and more aware of. And now I'd like to turn the podium over to Stacy Cannady to continue our presentation. We'll take questions later on. Stacy.
All right, thank you. Thank you for coming today. So, Cisco has a very entertaining infographic. Part of it is displayed here. It's actually 3 linear feet long, and I've just given you a little taste of the top of it. So I provide the URL if you want to go take a look at it. It goes on quite a bit about the Internet of Things and how big it is. So notice there on the left-hand side we have a graphic of the size of the planet, that brown ball, and we see this that it's being consumed by this blue circle that gets progressively bigger. That's the number of devices attached to the Internet, increasing over time. So sometime around 2009, the number of devices attached to the Internet of Things exceeded the population of people on Earth. And we see projecting out to 2020, maybe 50 billion devices will be connected to this Internet of Things. What are they all doing? And if everybody on Earth took responsibility for monitoring some of these devices, could we actually accomplish? No. Okay. So the point of this discussion is that there are more of them than there are of us. And they are going to go through their lives largely unmonitored, untouched by a human. That means further that given whatever the risk profile is of the device, it's going to have to be able to take care of itself. It's going to have to be able to do its job in spite of possibility of hostile action. And why? Why do we care? Well, we've just heard some of the range of devices that are part of the Internet of Things, and in many cases, those devices directly or indirectly affect your ability to continue breathing. So if something goes wrong with some of these devices, people can die, or property can be destroyed, or other unfortunate outcomes can arise. So why do we think this is going to happen? I mean, what evidence do we have that it's happened yet? And if it hasn't happened yet, then what makes us think it's ever going to happen? So that's what I'm trying to set up here with this little discussion. So 20 years or so ago, we saw a new phenomenon. This Internet thing was sweeping across industry and across the marketplace. Many Windows 3.1 systems were being attached to the Internet. And what happened next with all of these newly connected Internet accessible computers? Smart people started playing. Often they were young, sometimes teenagers, sometimes college students. Other young people began having fun. So here we are 20 years later, and what do we see in the Internet of Things? Well, we see in the Mediterranean, 2 Texas college students on vacation in the Mediterranean decided, hey, look, let's have some fun. And they overrode the GPS signals that an $80 million yacht was using to navigate at sea in the Mediterranean. So in effect, these college students took control of the steering of that yacht. It's just fun. What could possibly go wrong? Another young person, this time a teenager, a few years ago, I think it was, in Poland, loves trains. Loves trains. So he went down to the local train yard with the gizmo that he had purchased and cobbled together out of parts. And he took control of trains in the train yard. There were 2 people up in a control tower, and one said to the other, hey, George, are you moving that train? No, I thought you were moving that train. How am I moving that train? What could possibly happen? He was just having a little fun. Well, he derailed several trains, and 12 people got hurt doing that, but, well, you know, it was just good fun. Hacking cars on the highway. We heard that just recently that quite a few cars, just now we've heard quite a few cars have computers in them. In fact, the car you drove here probably had 100 computers in it, many of them controlling safety-critical operations in the car. Some researchers recently, this is a reference to a rather interesting DEF CON experiment, and I found in particular, they said they couldn't fix the car because they'd never seen this problem before. The people that hacked the car kind of blew up a system that nobody thought could be blown up, and need to. There's another report of researchers that noticed that There's a wireless sensor, a very inexpensive, small, limited functionality wireless sensor in the tires of many cars. And the purpose of that sensor is to report pressure. Who does it report the tire pressure to? Safety critical, mission critical systems inside the car. So these researchers found that they could jump through that wireless sensor in the car in motion into these safety critical systems in the car and take control of the accelerator and the brakes. What could possibly happen as a result of that? And then we have, how about all of these smart home features? Here we have a report. A reporter sat with a hacker and found a house. She was on the left coast, and the house was on the right coast, and they hacked into this house. So when they were sure that they had control, they called up the owner of the house, got them out of bed, and say, "Pardon me, I'm a reporter here. Can you tell me, are the lights going on and off in your bedroom right now?" "Yes." "Just thought we'd check." And then finally, we have the consequence of the release of a real-life cyber weapon like Stuxnet. Now, Stuxnet had a very particular targeted mission, but it represented a very sophisticated execution of malware. It used 4 previously unknown zero-day exploits. It represented maybe $10 million in labor and testing to build this device. It was released into the wild, and it got away from the people that released it. It was detected by software securities companies. I think Kaspersky was the first one to pick it up. It was disassembled, and the source code was made available. Who would take advantage of that kind of source code? What could they possibly do with something like that? Well, let's see. I think I list let's see. Gauss. Prior to Stuxnet, there was a reconnaissance malware called Flame. And Gauss is a derivative of Flame, but it's not by the same people. It's by people who got the source code for Flame. And what did they turn it into? They turned it into malware to be used for bank fraud. So we have some very serious players in the state, in the space, nation-state level players in the space. And when they release weapons, as all of these weapons do, they get out of control. They spread where they should not to be, and people see them that should not have seen them. And when that happens, and they figure out how they work, other people can take advantage of that same effort. You can bet that Gauss didn't cost $10 million to put together. It was just a modification of someone else's work. So, what are the downsides? What happened 20 years ago after we went through this phase of playing around? We're doing it for fun. What came next? Malware for money came next. So in the Internet of Things, what could possibly be a source for money in the Internet of Things? ATMs, blackmail, extortion, murder. Any of these are possible with today's technology against today's technology. When will we see them? If history is our guide, we'll see them soon. So with that, I will pass the baton.
How y'all doing? My name is Joseph, and we're going to, such good news, we'll smile and be happy, right? See if I know how to do this thing.
The big green arrow.
Yes. So this is just a disclaimer. Make sure we go back there. You know, these are not the views of the Air Force. These are my views. So we're all clear on the Air Force didn't say a bunch of stuff. Right, guys? Just in case there's any media in the room. All right. So we've heard some redundant comments guess what I'm going to do is give you, just working at the DOE and things like that, we had an opportunity to work with a lot of organizations that were trying to do standards on security. And, you know, what we'd like to do, what I think is, important is to speed up development of heterogeneous distributed trusted systems. Because no one's going to buy just one system. And when you start talking about cyber or Internet of Things, right now most people think about humans. I'm not talking about the people in this room, but most people do. They say, oh, it's going to be humans. It's not. It's going to be machines communicating with machines and stuff like that. And pieces of the machine communicating with pieces of the machine. So it's going to get really granular real quick. And so that means there's going to be different components that you're going to buy. You know, there's no car that's built by one company. There's no phone built by one company. They're assembled by one company. But that's how it works, right? And so that means that the phones, the cars, or whatever, everything's not going to be TCG certified. May not even have security in it, parts of it. And if I'm a hacker, am I going to look for the Fort Knox to break into? No. I'm going to look at the trap door. I'm trying to make my job easy and make my money big. So, you know, you have a lot of people like, the bottom one is air gapping. That's what a lot of people like to do, especially energy companies. They like to do, oh, if I don't put it on the regular internet, I'll be okay. Well, that's not reality. So observations, so these are just observations. Consumer-based networks are a niche market. In the future, even though we like to believe that your mobile phone system is not a control system, it really is. It's controlled by AT&T. It's controlled by Verizon. All right? You're not going to just do whatever you want to do and they not charge you for it. And so everything's motivated, at least commercially, by the dollar. But it's still a control system. Don't ever forget that. All right? You can call it whatever you want to, but that's what it is. And so everything primarily nowadays is a controlled system. If it's for dollars, for missions, or for whatever it is, there's a level of, I need to have authority to, or let you have authority to do certain things. And so I typically look at commercial control systems, like the control systems we often think of, like energy systems or industrial control systems. They have a 20 to 30 year lifespan. There's not a bunch of them being bought up, but they're the ones that you don't think about, but that's why your lights are on, that's why you use the bathroom, that's why you get water, all those subtleties. And I'm sure that no one would want a water bill that's $3,000 because they had to upgrade the system. So no one wants to hear about the 5-year reciprocal cycle that you like to say in the IT world. That's not going to be cost effective when your tomato costs $5. All right. So to the point, MTMs will be the fastest growing part of the Internet of Things. And the underlying component of it is cyber physical devices. What are cyber physical devices? Real-time networked embedded devices that provide wide area monitoring, protection, and control, and pretty much for the infrastructure. The NSA and a lot of other people recognize that you have to have built-in security. The built-in security is, the reality of it is, you're not building in security for the entire system. I can't protect everyone's kids, I just need to protect my kids, right? So the point is when I make a decision of what I'm going to protect in any device, I can't protect everything. I just need to protect that which will get me killed. Or make a cost-benefit analysis of what's the most important part to protect. So examples of critical infrastructures, I think we've all seen them globally, bulk power, oil and gas and water, and emergency services are critical infrastructures. And I'm using these because this is the Internet of Things that is really going to be the most important part. All right. The telecommunication system is obviously the Internet of Things. As the 4G networks continues to expand and we go to a V6 protocol everything. You can, as they say, you can put an IP address on everything. I want to stop for a minute and sort of point to one that's the most challenging, which is the bulk energy. Why? Well, bulk energy moves at the speed of what? It moves at the speed, pretty much the speed of light. But the comms, which is what makes it smart, moves also at the speed of what? Just about the speed of light, right? Just about. But you want to make sure that the comms tells you something before the energy does something. So that means no one cares if you got a really good security algorithm that takes a long time to decrypt. It's going to be not a good thing when your lights go off. So there are certain things of compromises. So when you start talking about these kinds of control systems, the most important thing is availability. Okay? Not security. Trustworthiness of the data is the second most important thing. And so that's where trusted data becomes important. Integrity of the data. And I want to stress that because a lot of security people say, well, confidentiality. Not in this game, it's not. Okay? That's not the most important thing. Because it can be as confidential as you want it to be. But if your lights go off, you won't care. Especially in Florida when it gets hot. All right? So at the DoD, we have the Global Information Grid, ISR, Personnel, Logistics, Supply, and Defense Industrial Base, which are your defense contractors or people that support us. Additional examples, which I think we've seen. Obviously, the MANETs, the mobile area networks, which are things that we set up in the military as well as they're set up all in most cities now. Here's a graphic I like to pause and sort of talk about. On one side you have very basic machines, router servers, laptops, arrays, and on the other side you have physical systems, which are sensor systems. Most assets, whether they're satellites to, so people have pointed out to me, soap dispensers are physical. You push, but you'd like to know when that runs out. You don't want to have to send somebody there all the time to check it. You'd like to do it at a time where it's cost effective so you don't have to pay everybody to do stuff. Me and a person got in a philosophical argument. I like laborers. A lot of people, basically these computational devices are removing laborers' jobs, and I'm not necessarily a proponent of that because I was raised on a farm part of my life, and farm boys are smarter than y'all think they are. Duct tape, you're a genius when you use duct tape the way I can. So anyway, the point is the dynamic computing of computational devices with sensors is what makes and what will make the challenge much harder, because we need real time, and sometimes confidentiality will be important, sometimes it won't be. And so let's talk about mission critical systems, all right? They need to be up all the time. Availability, reliability of the drivers. Cost. Again, the $5 tomato. When a company like Tennessee Valley Authority decides to buy a smart system, they're buying a smart system for 15 years. And when they invest in the maintenance agreements, which that's the killer, when you invest in a maintenance agreement and the agreement to when you're going to replace your pieces and parts, one of the things you always think about is consistent cost. And so the security cannot ramp up, or the need to constantly have to plug new stuff into a completely deployed system, that's just crazy. All right? So the longevity is 15 to 20 years. Used to be 30 before digital devices. What I'm saying is people are not buying when you say 5 years. Your stuff will stay on the shelf. All right? And the most important thing that people don't think of when you start talking about the GEs and the Siemens, the manufacturing line products. We saw back earlier that I talked about the energy system. Well, do you think they're going to invent a whole new system for the water system and a whole new system for the oil and gas? No. They're going to repurpose that system to the other one. So they're not going, no one's in the business to recreate everything. Everything's modular now, right? And so that means cost has to be always considered. Lines of products has to be considered. So differences, vendors do not typically build subcomponents. They build boxes. And it's just like a assembly line that's in there. Training as a driver. Latency. Latency at a substation is milliseconds, right? For faults and transients and things like that. It's also milliseconds in your cars when you start talking about your disc brake systems and your airbags. Most CPDs or Internet of Things that we're talking about are going to be ruggedized. They're going to be mostly embedded systems. One of the big enablers is 4G LTE, because now, you have transceivers that are everywhere. So here's my, this is Joseph's view of what you may want to consider, okay? So you have to develop trust anchors for cyber-physical devices. And so you have to be enabled to communicate amongst multiple devices, abroad and internally to the actual system that it's on. And they have to have various trust levels. Right now, everybody wants to say, well, you can trust me. Yeah, right. All right. There's levels. Means levels comes with a certain level of, from a vendor's perspective, cost. Because if you want it, but these are things you got to think about. Because which one do you trust more? The fact that your MP3 player or your radio's not working, or someone's telling you your brakes aren't working. So because that's what it's going to get down to. So here's my little view of what you may want to think about. Because no one's going to throw away the old system, guys. Not until you can show me the cost-benefit analysis of why I'm going to do that. So you may want to think about, how am I going to get something out of that thing, right? Then I'm going to be dealing with systems that have no trust. You can picture this in your car. You're going to have different kinds of cyber-physical devices with different kinds of trust on them. Some of it is going to be, as we say, on some kind of standard. Some of it's not. But we still have to deal with this as a user. And so, just like everything else, there are aggregation points. So, I think that it's going to come, that you're going to have trust aggregation points, because you have aggregation points with everything else. You can call them cells, right? Or whatever you want to call them, depends on what system you're in. You can call them SCADAs, where distributed SCADAs, but there's focal points in most things now where things come in and it has to be verified and validated at that spot. So I'm just giving you what I see that's going to have to come, where you have different types of trust coming at you. Some of it ECC, some of it RSA, but you have to trust all of it. Then you have some that's just saying you can trust me. These are things you just have to think about. I'm not saying you have an answer. I'm just saying this is reality. All right? So, decentralized, basically when you start talking about the Internet of Things, what are you talking about? Decentralized command and control. Because you can't control everything in one spot. You also have to know that, like Stuxnet, most coders, or most people who develop systems to test against known things that they're thinking about that could possibly happen. Right? Well, hackers don't do that. Everybody says, well, there's no way lightning can strike 16,000 times. Yes, it is. It's called a for loop. Okay? It can strike 16 times, okay? Is your system set up to deal with that? All right? Can you trust that data? So there's going to be a relationship between trust and the actual what the device is expected to do. It's coming. It's not going to be just trust the data. You're going to have to trust, did it give you the right advice? So sooner or later, it's going to be an amalgamation of the two. CMMI level. You know, what's the level of some of these devices? They're not all going to be the same. Some communication strategies are built from bottom up versus top down. In the energy company, for substation communication, they came up with the standards initially from the top down, from the top. People that don't know nothing about coding, that's basically what I just said. Good luck, and that is how it happened. All right? That was a train wreck. And so now, people from the bottom means people that know how to actually implement systems and now have to try to figure out, because those standards, those requirements that these people that don't know how to code are still there. How many people work in companies where the bosses don't really know anything about the actual software? A lot, right? But they're still making those rules. Is that going to change anytime soon? No. Right? We all can't be ran by Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, right? People actually know how to do coding. So I'm just giving you realities. Open standards, what does that really mean? Open standards for who? To the highest bidder? All right? I'm just keeping it real for you. And so these are things that are coming that we have to think about when we start talking about developing these new... I guess what I want to be clear is I'm a proponent of trusted computing, but I'm saying that it's not going to be homogeneous. That's all. I think that's it. There's some papers or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Allen. Thank you, Stacy, Cannady. Do we have questions from the audience? And if not, I have a couple. This is a fascinating area, and I touched on briefly the Black Hat book about physical security. I'm just curious of your perspectives on that part of the industry, security industry. Are these people doing good, or are they pointing out flaws that maybe we shouldn't be talking about? Any opinions on that?
I think I've been to a number of these presentations and watched on-the-fly hacking of medical systems that are inside people at the time, and watched them drop probes on chips and extract asymmetric keys as they're being used. So when I watch that sort of thing, the sense I have of it is that better we know that this is being done than we don't. Certainly I've seen colleagues come back from conferences like this and say, oh my God, we are so screwed. Well, these are people who are not security people. They come back from the conference and say, oh my God, we're so screwed. I like that. That helps me. So you can certainly say that in the short term there is a downside, because this is exploit code and it could be immediately weaponized and used to the advantage of an attacker and but from a midterm view and a longer term view, it's important for people outside of the security profession to have this moment. Oh my God. It helps move the ball forward inside the corporate world.
I think it's like X Games for hackers, you know. And the reason that comes to my mind is that, you know, I had a skateboard like a lot of people. And if I'd had the time and energy, I would probably try to do some of the crazy things that they did, right? So you have to know that kids have an enormous amount of time to do what they do. And if you want to put your head in the sand and think they're not going to do it because how dare, you know, yeah, they are creating jobs for people that are information security professionals, and I'm saying thank you. but at the same point, what they also are doing is showing, like I always tell people, if you think they're the only smart people in the world, then you're crazy, okay? So he's letting you to know what they can do to give you an insight of what other countries and other organizations can do to you. So it's tough, but it's just what it is.
Any questions from the crowd? Steve? Oh, he's going to talk about that. Now, a question, not a statement.
No, I'm not going to make a statement. This was fantastic. This was fantastic. The question I have is, it seems in the architecture you presented at the end of your slides that there's this concept of systems that the complexity of how the trust and infrastructure of that system is done can then be abstracted by a trust access point, we call it, or a TAP aggregation point, so that it can present capabilities onto other things. And so I'd like to understand your thoughts around the concept of capabilities, because it seems to me that that's one of the conversations we don't have enough about is, yes, I have identity of the device, but what are the actual capabilities of this device versus that one versus this one? Because there will be an infinite number of them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of the context of capabilities as part of your picture, your architecture. I can buy an advanced one or a simple one, but they're still...
When you say capabilities, are you saying what I see as the capability of a trusted aggregation point?
No, the purpose of the trusted aggregation point reporting on the capabilities or asserting the capabilities of a specific sensor or device or endpoint, or that it's really a mixture of not only the identity of the device or whatever, but so this is a really good one I'm talking to versus this one is not so good one, and so therefore my trust levels are different, etc.
Well, I think obviously if there's I talked about levels of trust, and two things I like. I like Kerberos. Okay, I like the way they thought. I mean, of course, MIT were nice. Okay, and they talked about the KDCs. Okay, and the KDCs can pretty much, if you look at, it's almost like a mini LDAP-ish kind of system where you have to have a schema that's sort of built in to give you sort of points of interest of what you want to do. When you start thinking about most SCADAs today, there's certain things depending upon what so the answer is, it's dependent upon the functionality. If it's a real-time system, I mean really real-time, sub-milliseconds, the trust of the data is the most important thing. So I would expect the capability to be able to trust the data and not slow the data down. So there would be a speed factor of the capability that I would expect. Obviously, it would be probably fibered all the way out, but that's what I would expect there. Whereas, let's talk about the maintenance, because everyone forgets about the maintenance, the software upgrade, or the pump of pain that they can give to you when you make a mistake. And say, I trust you. You're here to help me, right? That I want 3 to 5 pit bull dogs to be there, and the functionality of that from a confidentiality, integrity, all the whole 5 pillar. I want that thing on high, like Star Trek, phasers on, shields on high. So it's dependent upon what the functionality is of the actual the mission of what that thing's trying to do. And I use the term mission because everything has a job to do, whether it's just a talk. It's mission specific. And I talk about the energy company because energy companies are not in this country and not owned by one organization. And each one of them is not going to trust all of their data, specifically their money data, to another organization. Neither is the car companies or anything else. So they would place a higher confidentiality on their fiscal transactions. So I hope I answered your question, but it's industry and I will say mission specific.
My question is kind of along the lines of what was raised about Black Hat vulnerabilities. Are these people being responsible, disclosing what they know? I want to turn that around a little bit to the perspective of a vendor and perhaps a consumer, or a contractor, or the government even, in terms of if a vendor becomes aware of a vulnerability, what is the vendor's responsibility to proactively communicate that to the purchasers of these systems, the users of these systems, and what, as a consumer or purchaser, what would you expect? Because chances are the vendors know far more things than any of us would really be interested in revealing about ways that our systems could be broken.
So there are enterprises who come down on all sides of this issue. I've been fortunate enough to work for enterprises that have policy of disclosure of security exposures to their customers under NDA. Certainly when those exposures represent a threat to the welfare of the customer. This often generates extremely difficult conversations. But the customers, even though they are pissed off, because this is going to represent a lot of risk for them, a lot of exposure for them, they do appreciate that they found out from the vendor, not from the New York Times. And the conversations are much harder when they do find out from the New York Times. And that's actually the business reason why those companies elect to do it ahead of time.
I think DHS has a reporting scheme where they try to make it so that vendors can report anonymously issues that they find, that so that they don't lose dollars. I mean, companies are in business to make money, okay? And everybody has to. What doesn't happen, and what I think the information security people should do is you have to present a company with a risk matrix. Cost, and remember, cost is not necessarily a dollar thing. Cost may be a political thing. It could be a power thing. Whatever the cost is to your user, because there's a slippery slope here. Suppose you find a backdoor in every widget. Well, I want to get something. Suppose you find a backdoor in everybody that owns a new Ford Focus. It's a well-selling car. Suppose it's something that any high school kid could do. Do you want to A, notify the people, or do you want to try to fix it first? I don't know the answer to that. So it's a policy question that you're asking. Because if a high school student can do it, and I got 3 boys right now that can break something in a heartbeat, they're going to do it. So it's a chess match, because some of it could be national security issue, and you sitting up there saying, okay, am I going to tell everybody we have a vulnerability that could, before I get it fixed, they could do something to me? I can't answer that question. It's a difficult question to answer.
Are your sons being recruited by the NSA? Give a follow-up.
I guess just an observation that it does somewhat depend on scale. If you're selling a piece of equipment or a solution where your customer set is 20, 30, double-digit kind of numbers, the NDA conversations can be had. If it's the Ford Focus and there's 1 million of them out there, who do you talk to? And is there more? It seems like there's a tipping point associated with scale of the notification. And I get that it's a policy decision. Just looking for some opinions on what the policy should be. So, thank you.
Probably driven by industry. The case of the Ford that you gave would be subject to a recall, I would expect, either voluntary or mandated, depending on the severity of the problem. But it's such a diversified area we're talking about, the Internet of Things and all kinds of things. We got some real significant issues. Yes?
Yeah, so the policy issue is kind of an important one because when you talk to the people that actually run SCADA systems like the electric industry, and the way we do wholesale distributions nowadays from an entrepreneurial standpoint, everybody's a competitor to everybody else. So a guy in Utah is generating electricity, and it's no storage, it's real-time sales. So it's speed-of-light type stuff. And if that guy in Arizona can buy power, excess power capacity from Utah or from Colorado, it's the guy that gets there first with the lowest price. So if there's not a regulatory system somewhere that says you have to harden your system, and hardening systems adds some to the cost of electrical distribution and electrical production, then they're not going to do it. So one thing the policy and regulatory systems can do is kind of level the playing field by saying, here's a minimum level of security that you have to install so that everybody has that same burden. And it's not a competitive issue at that point. Here's what you need to make a good system to actually hook up to the national grid so that we can actually pursue our dream of entrepreneurships as we go through. And I know that's a comment, not a question, but if anybody would like to comment on what I just said.
If you end with an upward inflection, it sounds like a question.
So I'd invite comments on that.
Aren't there some policies that came down, or maybe guidelines from people like FERC and EPRI and the utility industry? I know the EPI was looking at one time for someone to lead the challenge, but maybe you have some
guidelines don't hack it. So it's the guy that gets there with the lowest production cost and the lowest distribution cost. So while guidelines are nice, we have a designated risk guy in that electric company who's taken the risk of not surviving to his next quarterly report and paying his stockholders his dividend, or taking those measures against some future, because we haven't had a cyber 911. It's interesting we're doing this on 911. Yeah. We've had a physical 911. We have not had a cyber 911.
We haven't had a reported
doesn't take a cyber 911 to do this.
I think I would say we haven't had a reported cyber 911.
Yes,
I guess I'll say that.
Avoided reporting things that might be reported.
Why would we report? I mean, that's again, weighing apples, right? I think you're talking about I2Os, independent transmission offices. And independent transmission offices are in the business, thanks to good old Enron. They suck. Personal comment. That's my personal opinion.
Asterisk.
Asterisk, exclamation point. But the point of that is that I'm sort of giving you guidance as to, if you're a security company and you're trying to make a reason why someone needs to buy your stuff, you have to get to know your customer, just like the person that sells the Cisco widgets or whatever. But you have to really know the cost-benefit analysis of this is what happens if this happens. And you have to show them, because you're, again, talking to the person who doesn't know nothing about security and doesn't care, other than the fact that it's an unfreaking factored cost that he now has to concern himself with. And he doesn't like unfactored costs. That means there's less money in his pocket. And so you have to show him or her why what you're talking about is of value. That means you have to know that mission. And a lot of times people come into a car dealership talking about chicken wings. Well, this is not what's that Buffalo Wild Wings? This is not Buffalo Wild Wings, this is Toyota. And so you have to provide an argument that is indicative of the customer you're talking about. And so that means you have to really know something, because you have to prevent. They don't care about the pretty pictures. They want Excel, and they want to see dollars and cents, whatever their mission is. And if you can provide that, you have a good argument. And that's what I would suggest. Whatever their argument is, if it's the speed of light, if it's dollars lost based on I was at where was I at? It was, I go to Whole Foods a lot here in Orlando. And the Whole Foods here has a bar of food that you can get. And it's been open for about 5 years. And recently, they now have an undercover security guy. Well, in order for them to spend the dollars to get an undercover security guy, the amount of free buffet food that was going out the door had to hit a threshold where they did the cost-benefit analysis to, we got to hire security because it's costing us more money not to hire. They don't mind getting hacked or whatever, but they have a cost. They have this margin. So you have to know the margin of your customer. It's really a business. It's a policy issue.
Last question.
See, now I'm the last guy between us and food, I can tell.
No, you're not. Check your calendar. You're wrong. Sorry.
Out. Okay. Early. So you may have just answered the question, but I was thinking of it more from a trusted computing perspective. The question is, okay, so there's this long list of Internet of Things that I'm now petrified about because they can all get hacked. Where do we start? Where are the trusted computing people? Where are the security people? From a practical perspective, one has to start somewhere. I hear regulatory bodies might just completely might be A place to start, or B, a place that's going to completely squash the ability to start in certain areas. So what's a good starting point?
I would argue you start within the domain that you're working in.
From taking off from that point of view to taking a TCG perspective on that, I would say that TPM represents one end of approach, that is from the individual device hardware up, and TNC represents a network down approach to providing enhanced trust for these devices. So we have a TPM involved in validating the integrity of the software and firmware on the system and offering the opportunity to present integrity reports to other devices in the environment with which it has to communicate. So now we've got some notion of trust, in the sense that it is what I think it is, or it is not. It is the device I think it is, or it is not. It is running the software I think it is, or it is not. So that's the beginning of an ability to make a trust assessment of the device. Once this device is up and operational, things can happen to it that are unfortunate. It may be that we trusted it an hour ago and we shouldn't trust it now. How are we going to know that? Well, that's where something like TNC, working from the network down, offers some opportunities. So we have an opportunity to interrogate the device, to put a client on the device that is able to report back about the current status, the current operational status of the device, whether the device can be trusted at the moment. So the challenge, going to some of Dr. Allen's points about cost, the challenge here is can this be done at a very economical level, or at least at a level that the end customer is willing to accept that cost. So we often use SSL when we want to buy online. Did any of us pay for an SSL client? No, but not directly at any rate. It may be part of the operating system that we purchased, and in that case we could have spent a few pennies on it. Or we could be using some sort of an open source implementation where we have this opportunity to provide this security mechanism that we have trust in for the purpose of this transaction. So we have, from the Trusted Computing Group's point of view, we are pushing from both ends, top down, bottom up, to create the possibility of making statements about trust and having conversations about trust and making determinations about I trust this more than I trust that, or the other way around. there is still an opportunity here to have conversations about cost and policy. And as Dr. Allen said, the customer has to make the effort to form his policy with regard to risk. Without that policy, he doesn't really need anything, I guess. He can just go on as he's going on until he can't.
Okay. Final word?
From a research perspective, don't place all your bets in one root of trust. Because, sooner or later ECC is going to supplant RSA, so your asymmetric keys are going to have to change. And what happens when some company deploys millions of stuff, right? There has to be a way for them to be able to change their root of trust. I know that was a very tough comment I just made, because I know roots of trust are roots of trust. The reality is, root of trust of today cannot be considered the only root of trust for 15 to 20 years, right? And so you have to ask yourself a question, if you're from a research perspective, how do I make this thing? And I'm going to say something y'all going to, no apples here, no tomatoes. Reconfigurable roots of trust. No, that sounds sacrilegious. I know I don't know if it's possible. I am just saying that just think about what's going to happen. These guys are going to deploy something and someone says, well, I figured out how to hack ECC. What you going to do?
I think actually the hitch in the get along is not so much the reconfigurability of a trust anchor, but who gets to do that? That for me, sitting on a different part of this equation, who gets to do that is the really hard part.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is don't place your bets on symmetric and asymmetric keys, and when you offer something out, it can't be just one set, because that's just not reality.
Let's close it off there. Before I thank the panel, I'd just like to take a moment, that we take a moment of pause and reflection on what occurred 12 years ago, how far we've come. Let's take about just 30 seconds or so of silence. Okay, love those short naps. I want to thank Dr. Josef Allen. I'd like to thank Stacy Cannady. Thank you very much for a lively discussion.